Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Brian Lawfer, and I am the Vice President here at QuoteWerks. Today, we will be talking about QuoteWerks Web, obviously. What we're going to do is talk about what the requirements are, how it's deployed, the user experience, and of course, answering your questions. And based on the questions that I was asking at the beginning of the webinar here, it looks like a lot of you have never seen QuoteWerks before, so this should be a really interesting webinar here. So if you have questions as we go along here, please feel free to ask them in the GoToWebinar toolbar questions box as we go along. If there are any questions that I do not answer throughout the webinar, I will do my best to answer them towards the end. They can be about QuoteWerks Web, database hosting, or just QuoteWerks in general. If you think of a question after the webinar or I do not fully answer your question, make sure to email or give us a call. Community@quoteworks.com is the best email address if it is related to this webinar. So as you can see, we will have a short PowerPoint presentation first, like we typically do. Then we'll actually be demonstrating QuoteWerks Web, followed by the opportunity for you to ask more questions. And I really do invite you to ask questions. That's how everybody is going to get the most out of this webinar. If you have a question, there's a good chance somebody else will as well. So what were our goals with QuoteWerks Web? Well, we wanted to make sure, oops, there we go. We wanted to make sure that there were not going to be any migration costs. And what I mean by that is a lot of times, when desktop applications go to the cloud, they have some sort of migration process. So whether that be your layouts or your data or any of that, we didn't want that. We wanted to make sure all of your existing data, including your QuoteWerks print layouts, work with web. Key was similar and familiar, but updated interface. As some of you may have seen, a good portion of the people that are in this webinar right now have used QuoteWerks for over 5 years. The QuoteWerks community as a whole has been using QuoteWerks for almost 30 years. So we want to make sure that it's similar and familiar, but an updated interface. We wanted to update the look of QuoteWerks while keeping in mind the time and costs involved in training your employees. And then most importantly, that a sales rep can do everything they need in the browser to create, modify, and deliver the quote. So what does that mean? Well, basically that means that you won't have to install anything on their laptop or on their desktop. So that was something that was very important to us. And I'm pleased to tell you that we achieved all of these goals and continue to enhance them. Feature parity between QuoteWerks Web and desktop is of utmost importance to us. When we write a new integration, we do so in a way that can be used by both platforms. And we've created utilities that assist us in development to speed up the process for writing for both. And if you haven't seen QuoteWerks Web in a while, the demo today will show you how far we've come and give you a glimpse into where we are going. So just a little overview and the requirements for QuoteWerks Web here. So QuoteWerks Web can either be an add-on or a hybrid experience for existing customers, or a hybrid or standalone option for new customers as well. And the corporate edition of QuoteWerks is required since it will be using the SQL backend for QuoteWerks. And of course, we do need a current UMP or maintenance program, because we are continually coming out with updates and new features for web as feature parity continues here. So the QuoteWerks Web Access license is only $10 a month per concurrent user for existing desktop customers. Your web licenses do not need to match your desktop licenses, but they cannot exceed that count either. So let me explain it with an example here, and I think if you did have any questions, it'll make more sense with this example here. So if you have a QuoteWerks 5-user corporate edition license and 2 QuoteWerks Web Access licenses, then that means you can have a maximum of 2 people using the web interface of QuoteWerks and 3 people using QuoteWerks Desktop at any given time. So in short, whether you're using QuoteWerks through the web or the desktop, you're using a license. Additionally, the number of users that can be in QuoteWerks Web at the same time is limited by the number of web access licenses that you have. With the QuoteWerks Web solution, there is no need to migrate your data, as I said, because QuoteWerks Web is using the same database as QuoteWerks Desktop. And we're going to repeat that through this entire webinar here. And this innovative approach decreases complexity and removes any potential costs in terms of time or money that would be associated with a migration process. I do see that there have been some questions come in. I will answer those as we get a little bit further along here. So as far as product overview, basically integrations with the different CRMs and PSAs are pretty much all of the web-based ones. There might be one or two that we need to update for, and we'll talk about that towards the end or offline here. But we also are able to integrate, obviously, with the built-in QuoteWerks contact database as well. As we've already discussed, you're able to create, edit, and deliver your quotes, and that's including via PDF, sending it via email, and of course via Quote Valet as well, which flows in nicely to this next part here. All of your existing subscriptions, whether it be the product content subscription or Eatalyze, Quote Valet, or vendor RFQ will also be available for QuoteWerks Web as well. You'll have access to all of your product databases as long as they're native or a cloud-based database that we integrate with, as well as, like we've already said, your covers, layouts, literature, spec sheets, including your Word documents, will all be able to be used in QuoteWerks Web. Also, if you subscribe to our QuickBooks Online integration, you'll be able to export documents to QuickBooks as well, just like you do in desktop. So the QuoteWerks SQL database, like we've said, is shared by both the desktop and web versions of QuoteWerks. So the data itself will never be out of sync. There's no need to synchronize your quotes or your orders or your invoices. Basically, if you create a quote on QuoteWerks desktop, you'll be able to immediately open it in the browser to make changes and deliver it to your customer. Settings and customizations made in the desktop will also be used in web and vice versa. When you first log into QuoteWerks Web, you'll notice that all of your column customizations followed you from the desktop. What will basically need to be kept in sync will be like images, spec sheets, and layouts, basically anything not stored in the database. But you don't have to worry, we've implemented intuitive ways that will enable these types of files to be synchronized to QuoteWerks Web as needed. So we do offer SQL database hosting, and what's a benefit of that to you is the fact that you're not going to need to make any firewall changes. You don't have to worry about security. You don't need to worry about database backing up, or basically any of those security or maintenance that you would have to do as well. And since QuoteWerks Web, as well as the database hosting, as well as Quote Valet and vendor RFQ are all going to be on the same virtual network, it's going to be fast as well. So basically, our database hosting is designed specifically for QuoteWerks Web and vendor RFQ users, but really it could be used by any QuoteWerks user as well, even if you just have desktop, if you don't want to have to maintain your own SQL database. Now, that being said, if you don't want to use our database hosting, you can still continue to host your own SQL data. In fact, the demo today is actually using a SQL database at our office and QuoteWerks Web. This is not the fastest configuration, but it will show you real-world results in this configuration option. You can also use third-party hosting partners, Azure, as well as Amazon as well. And the QuoteWerks database hosting will be the fastest option for QuoteWerks Web users, like we've talked about, again, because they're on the same network. And I just want to go into a little bit of technical stuff here, and then we'll go into actual QuoteWerks Web here. So we've got some technical diagrams here. This is the self-hosted option here on the right, where basically, you're running on a local network, your SQL database is on your network, QuoteWerks is installed on your server, and you've got workstations. But then as soon as you want to use QuoteWerks Web, then you're going to have to make firewall changes here. So keep that in mind. And so basically, if you're on the workstation, you're going to go through your firewall, talk to QuoteWerks Web, that's going to talk to your SQL database. And if you're in a self-hosted database working with a laptop, it's going to be similar, but you're going to be going more back and forth between the firewall. So you're going to go through the internet, talk to QuoteWerks Web, which is going to have to talk to the firewall, which is going to have to talk to your SQL database. However, with our database hosting here on the left, what's going to happen is, if you're in a network environment, The FAT client is going to go through your firewall, talking through the internet and going to the SQL database and going this way. No firewall changes needed. If you're using QuoteWerks Web, basically your workstation is going to go through your firewall, and it's going to be very fast going back and forth between web and the SQL and vice versa. And then very similarly with web here. All right. So last thing here, I did want to talk about authentication. Security is very important to me personally, so I'm sure it's going to be important to some of you guys out there as well. Basically, before we get into the different types here, about a year ago, we did send out a survey about QuoteWerks Web security, and a good portion of you still wanted the ability just to have a traditional username and password. So we kept that. But we also have other options based on the results of that survey as well. So we have two-factor via text message, as well as additional multi-factor options via authenticator apps, and that can be via Google or Microsoft or others, as well as Duo as well. So, we use those survey responses in development quite a bit. So if you want to provide direct feedback and influence the direction of QuoteWerks and our solution here, make sure to answer those survey requests. All right. And then just so you guys know, the resources that are available to you, you can always call support. You don't have to create a ticket first, but if it's not time sensitive, I definitely recommend sending an email to support@quoteworks.com. Our number is just 407-248-1481. And if you want to get a trial of QuoteWerks Web, and if you have the ability to configure your firewall, we can go ahead and turn it on immediately for you. Or if you're on our hosting, we can turn it on for you as well. And then we do have lots of videos that are available, help documentation, live and recorded webinars, just like these. And then we offer professional services, training, partners, and whatnot as well. And I guess the last thing here, I invite you to follow us on social media. That's how you get notified about events like our webinars, events that we're going to be at. We've got a number of events we're going to be at after the summer here and towards the end of the year, as well as while we go through this, make sure to ask questions. We've got a few of them so far, like I said, and like we've already discussed, this webinar will be recorded. Okay, so I think the easiest thing to do is let's go ahead and answer some of the questions that came up here. And question from Melanie is there going to be a recording of this sent to us? Yes, it will be available on our website as well as on our YouTube channel. I believe we will send it out to all the people that have registered as well, but the best thing to do is just follow us on social. You'll get a link to it there. Okay, so a question here from Daniel about finding products. That's a good question about adding products. I don't know what the timeline is, but we'll talk about the quick search capabilities that are in desktop. They're not in web yet, but that might be something that's further along than I think, but we'll talk about that. Let's see, and then question from Paul, if hosted in the web, do you keep the product updated with current versions? So that's a good question. Basically, as long as you'll need to update the desktop periodically, but we make that very simple to do. And we'll have a video that talks about how to do that. But basically, as you update QuoteWerks, you'll update QuoteWerks Web in the back end as well without having to have any user interface. All right. So let's start with QuoteWerks Desktop here first. This should look very similar to what you guys have right now. What we can do is we can start a new quote here via a template, for instance. So I've got a workstation template here. And then I can go ahead and search for a contact. And I'm doing this on purpose so that you guys can see the process on desktop, and then we'll replicate this in web. So if I wanted to here, I could go ahead and bring in Joe here. I can go ahead and copy over the address information, just like you guys are already used to doing. If I wanted to, I could move this guy up here one, and maybe change this to change this to 5, and now everything has a quantity of 5. So we've got a basic quote here. So let's go ahead and save this, and we'll just call this webinar sample and click on OK. All right, so it's been saved. What I'll do is close this now, and I can go over to QuoteWerks Web, and Web is very easy to launch. Basically, if you go to our website, you can just click on Login right there, and that'll bring you right into Web. And what we'll do here is click on Recent, and just like that, we've got our webinar sample that I created on desktop here. And you can see that we have our different line items here from the quote. If I wanted to, I could be like, you know what, I really wanted to move that back. So again, drag and drop capability is available. You also have the ability to undo things as well if you wanted. So we could undo that. And then also, if we go to the Sold to, Ship to tab, you'll notice that we have our contacts. If we wanted to, we could search for a different contact here. And if I go back here to my workspace, you'll see that now the sold to is Thor's Hammers. I could go ahead and copy that over from the sold to into the ship to. Again, very similar. And then what we can do here is go to our sale info. If we wanted to make any changes based on the expiration date, maybe add some leasing options, we have that option. If we go to the notes tab, you'll see this is looking very similar to desktop, and that is on purpose here. If we go to the links tab, we have all of our links as well. We even have a quote valet tab here. You'll see that it's grayed out. And the reason that this is grayed out is because I haven't sent it out via quote valet yet. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. And I can do that by clicking on deliver. And just like in desktop, it's going to be like, hey, you made a change, you need to save this. So let's go ahead and save it. And now what I'm going to do is select a layout. My cover pages, literature, spec sheets, all of this is exactly the same as I have on desktop here. And what I'm going to do is first, let's go ahead and take a look at it. So I can go ahead and click on preview here, and it's going to go ahead and process out the layout here, and it generated the PDF. So it's, as you can see, here is the QuoteWerks layout that I'm already used to using on desktop, but now it's in the web. So let's just say that that looks good. So if I wanted to, I could submit it for peer review or request approval, just like I do again in desktop. But let's go ahead and upload this to Quote Valet here. And it just takes a moment the first time, just like it does in desktop. And we'll go ahead and upload that. And this is my preview. So this is what it's going to look like. Looks great. So now let's go ahead and send the email. And this is using my same templates that I use in desktop. And now I can just click on send, and it was sent. So now I have the ability to go to my Quote Valet tab, and there we go, just like I would have in desktop, we've got all of this. So if I go to my Quote Valet dashboard, just like I would in desktop, you'll notice that I have all of my activity here. Here's one that I did earlier. I can go ahead and show the activity for that if I wanted to. So I can see that, it was uploaded. I asked for some peer reviews, and then the customer viewed the document. All right, so let's go ahead and see. Now that we've had a little bit of questions come in. Question from Jeff: can pre-configured quotes be created? Yes, I think that's kind of what we're talking about here, where I've got the new from template, and I'll go ahead and do that here in just a moment. Shanna has a question: when will the purchasing button be added to QuoteWerks Web? We are actively working on that right now. So great question, and that will be coming soon. I don't have the actual release date, but I do know that we have developers working on that. See, question from Jeff: can you upload multiple parts from a spreadsheet? Yes, we have Paste Special in QuoteWerks Web, just like we do in desktop. So you have the ability to do that. Also, if you want to import a product database, we have that capability as well, and I'll go over that in a little bit. Another question here: does QuoteWerks Web integrate with Salesforce? If yes, what are the advantages that QuoteWerks provides? Yes, QuoteWerks does integrate with Salesforce. just like QuoteWerks Desktop does. The benefit of using QuoteWerks Web here is the fact that you're not going to have to install any software in order to use it as a sales rep. A question here from Paul. He's assuming that this will work with ConnectWise Local as well as ConnectWise Hosted. Yes, QuoteWerks Web will work with both versions of ConnectWise because you just put in that URL. And we're going to talk a little bit about the setup with ConnectWise as well, because that was the first CRM that actually has setup capabilities within QuoteWerks. So we'll talk about that. All right, so I'm going to hold off on some questions here because we're going all over the place. So let's go ahead. We had a question about the pre-configured quotes being created. So let's go ahead and click on the new button here. And let's go ahead and create a new quote from template, just like we did in desktop. And you'll notice that now I have a new workstation quote, just like I had on desktop. And what I can do now is go to Sell to Ship To, go ahead and search for a contact. It'll remember the last contact that I was working with. Let's go ahead and search for Joe's Brewing here. And actually, let's bring it in for all. And you'll notice that we have status information coming up on the right-hand side here. So if I go back to my workspace, you'll notice that Joe Brewer is all the way across. But maybe we want to go ahead and add in another section here. So let's go ahead and maybe add a new heading. If we wanted to, we could go ahead and say new items. And what we can do now is go to our products. So you'll notice that we still have Eatalize. We have the ability to use Amazon if we wanted to. We have all of our native product databases as well, including products with folders. We can do it by manufacturer, all just like we did in desktop. So if we wanted to, we could go ahead and bring in this guy. We'll go ahead and add it. We could see the price history for this customer as well as in general. So let's go ahead and see the price history. Here you go. There's our price history for that item. That way we can see to make sure we stay within a certain price range. We can also see for a particular customer. I've never sold it to Joe's Brewing before, so it's not going to have anything. So if I wanted to, I could put it under a certain section or heading. Let's go ahead and put it under new items here, like I just created. And we'll click on add. And it was now added to my quote. If I wanted to, I could even search like Zoho or QuickBooks or ConnectWise or Autotask, any of the ones that we might be using. In this case, I'm using QuickBooks Online, so I am able to use this. If you're using QuickBooks Desktop, unfortunately, you won't be able to do that. So maybe we'll look for a switch. Got a couple of switches here. Let's go ahead and add that to my quote. And we're going to go ahead and add that under our new items. Again, showing that there. And then what we can do is we can go over to Eatalize. This is what my last search was. You'll notice that we have a little bit of a different search interface than we do on desktop, and that's because things have changed a little bit. So if I wanted to, I can do my F2 lookup again, like I do on desktop. So if I had like predefined items that I would normally be searching for, I could do that. So if I wanted to, I could look for this patch panel, do a search. You can see over here that this one was in stock recently, and it's showing me what my list price and list high were. So let's go ahead and click on that. And it's getting our pricing and availability. And now I can see my pricing from TD SYNNEX, from Ingram, our products, and the primary vendor. Basically, I've got this set up to use that. So let's go ahead and add this one from SYNNEX. And we can go ahead and click on add. And I was talking earlier about like products that we normally purchase. Well, again, similar to what we have on desktop, we have the favorites option here as well. And we've got my favorites, which are specific to the sales rep, but we also have public favorites as well, which is specific to the company. So if I wanted to here, I could go over to workstations. These are both in stock recently, so that's great. Let's go ahead and take a look at what pricing actually is for these items. And that gives us an idea. If we wanted to, we can drill down on different accessories and whatnot. maybe take a look at this one. Just give it a second here. It's going out and getting pricing from all of those. And we've got all of our pricing information. But maybe we want to kind of see what the difference is. So what we can do is we can click on compare and compare. And over here, we've got our compare window here. Let's go ahead and get pricing and availability for all of these. This way we can get a better look at what's going on. And now you can see that we can see the differences on a line-by-line basis between these. So, you know, as far as maximum memory is concerned, one has 1 terabyte, the other one has 768 gig. You know, it gives us this capability as far as like the size to see what we want. So if we wanted to, maybe we could go ahead and add this one to our quote. And now I can go back to my workstation here. And there we go. We've got all of our items now on our document. All right. So now that we've gone through that a little bit, let's go ahead and take a look at the totals for all items bar. This is something that we've continually enhanced for on web to work more like on desktop. So you'll notice if I don't have any items selected, it's showing me for all items. If I select one item, actually, let's use one that actually has cost. If I select one item here, it'll show me all the information for that one. If I select multiple items, it's going to show me for those selected items as well. Again, the same functionality that's on desktop. See, question from Justin. Does QuoteWerks Web have integration with Autotask and ConnectWise? Yes. And we do have some videos showing that capability. It's not the most updated ones because, again, we're continually updating QuoteWerks Web to have feature parity with desktop, but we will have more webinars and more videos added to our website so you can take a look at that. But yes, we do have integrations, obviously, with Autotask and ConnectWise. Question from Carlos here. A QuoteWerks Web desktop question. Can we add MSRP pricing to the quotes and then the prices we are charging? Yes, you can definitely add the list price, which is the same as MSRP. And then you can either make it the same as your list price or mark it up from there. And basically, you just need to customize your columns to be able to see that. Like on this one, I don't know if I have list price shown. I just don't normally like to use list price just because it's kind of arbitrary. So here's list here. So you definitely have the ability to do that. If you wanted to, we could make our price modifier here be the same as list. And that's how you would do that. Let's see, question from Mike. See, very excited about this development. Any plans to allow customization of our Quote Valet landing page? Yes, you do have the ability to customize your Quote Valet templates. It's not available in web yet, but you do have the ability to do that in desktop. And you do have the ability to go switch back and forth between web and desktop very easily in that case. Comment from Hank. Yeah, compare is a very nice feature. Thank you. See, Ron doesn't remember seeing the compare on desktop. I believe it's there. Might just add it to the workstation. I mean the workspace, but we definitely do have that capability there, Ron. Let's see. Question from Evan. Does QuoteWerks Web sync with Sedona Office Web? Unfortunately, QuoteWerks Web does not. We do have the ability to link to external sources, but not in that way. I believe that Sedona Office is populating our product list. As long as it's populating the product list and you're hosting your own SQL database, we would have the ability to link to that. Okay, question from Frank here. Does QuoteWerks Web integrate with Sugar CRM? Yes, it does. And actually, since we're here, let's do this real quick. So on our website here, we do have all the different integrations. So as you can see, here are all of the contact integrations that we have currently. All right, as I'm going through here, that'll give you an option. But basically, if you go to quoteworks.com, you'll see the QuoteWerks web link, and that is where to go. Question from Alex, wanting to know if QuoteWerks Web has the ability to edit the layouts yet. QuoteWerks Web does not, but when you do make a modification to a layout in desktop, what you can do is you can immediately sync it back up to web by clicking the Sync QuoteWerks Web button here. I'll go ahead and sync the files up. You can also sync down as well. In this case, we'll sync up. Should be pretty quick here. You'll notice that there is one action that failed, and that is because in QuoteWerks Web, we do have a file limitation of 25 meg per file. But that's the only reason why. Otherwise, everything is synced up as it should be. Good question, James. About QuoteWerks Web and an API. Currently, QuoteWerks Web does not have an API. Basically, what we're trying to do first is make sure that QuoteWerks Web has a good enough feature parity with desktop so that basically we don't even need desktop for anything anymore. But basically, as a QuoteWerks Web user, you're going to be using QuoteWerks Desktop as more of a utility than anything else. So, maybe some setup stuff, customizing the layouts, but day-to-day operations, you really don't need to use desktop anymore. Once we get to that point, then we're going to be talking about APIs and other customizations that people have been asking for. So question from Mike, we're going to answer this question here, and then what we're going to do is go on and show a little bit more in QuoteWerks Web. So question here, we would need to move our database to your hosting. How is the pricing for that going to work? You don't necessarily need to move to our hosting. If you currently have QuoteWerks rehosted to SQL either on your premise or up on Azure or some other place, QuoteWerks Web will be able to link directly to that. However, if you want to use our hosting is an additional $10 a month per user. So if you have 2 QuoteWerks licenses, then it would be $20 a month for that hosting. And then we do offer annual price breaks as well. All right, and like I said, if you are using QuoteWerks Web, our hosting is definitely going to be the best solution, as well as if you're using vendor RFQ as well. All right, so let's go through and do a little bit more here, talk a little bit about the different setup options. We talked about the Quote Valet dashboard. Actually, let's go ahead and save this real quick. So the interface here on the save, it's going to be very similar to what you have on desktop. So as far as some of the interface options here, you'll notice that on the left-hand side, we have Quote Valet Insight. So it's the same insight that you use currently. Quote Valet Dashboard, which we've already shown. We have our vendor maintenance over here. So you have the ability, so these are basically some test vendors that I use when using vendor RFQ. But if we were to edit this, we have the ability to go in and make modifications to our setup here for these vendors. Again, very similar to what you're already used to. You can actually run reports. As long as it's a text file output, we'll be adding more reporting capability here to web coming up. In the setup options, we do have CRM integrations. So right now you can select what your primary CRM is going to be. But if you are using ConnectWise, we can actually set up the ConnectWise integration right through web as well. You have the ability to import products, again, just like you do in desktop. You can set up your different users, as well as see what your licensing is like as well. If I go back over here to our workspace here, you'll notice if we go over to QuickBooks, here's all of my documents that I haven't sent over to QuickBooks yet. And this will work if it's QuickBooks Online. You'll notice this interface is very similar to desktop. Again, keeping it so it's very similar to what you're already used to doing, so you don't have to go through a retraining process. If I click up here on my name, that's going to go, or my image here, it's going to take me to my preferences. So tools, my preferences. So I have the ability to change the picture for my sales rep image, as well as my electronic signature. If I go to email here, I have the ability to set up my email. I can go to all of my miscellaneous settings, again, similar to what I have on desktop. And if I click on cancel here, I can go over to setup and options. It's going to take a moment here because it's going to read every single option that we have for the site. Question, how many quotes can we have open at the same time? That's a good question. I think it's 5, but I could be wrong. If you send an email to support@quoteworks.com, they can definitely answer that for you. See, question from John. If you're experiencing any difficulty with your QuoteWerks desktop or anything like that, definitely contact support. They'll be able to help troubleshoot that for you. All right. Just going through the questions. We'll go ahead and skip ahead a little bit here. So looking at the setup here, if we go to documents, you'll notice that this is going to be very similar to what you've already used in desktop. We can go to custom here. We have access to all of our custom memo fields. If we go back to the main options, you'll see that the interface is going to be very similar to any other web app. We're making it as easy as possible to use. We have the scroll capabilities here. A feature that we added recently is the ability to have your company logo within the options, as well as company pictures. That way you can have them on your layouts, and that way you can change them periodically as you need to. And that way you change it in one space instead of doing it on each individual layout as well. But as you can see, we have all the setup options that you would normally have. Question here from James. If we choose to get web and then also vendor RFQ, do you recommend QuoteWerks SQL hosting, or would it be okay to use it ourselves? Good question, James. It's going to be really up to you. If you already have your own SQL server, it's probably going to work just fine as long as your internet speed is fast enough and you're able to configure your firewall. If you do run into problems, we can help migrate that data for you. That is a paid service, but you do have different options if you already have it on SQL. If you're not rehosted to SQL yet, you can rehost to our hosting yourselves just with a very easy menu option. All right. Wow, lots of questions. Okay, so we're 40 minutes in here. Couple of things I did want to show you guys as well. So something you'll notice if we go back over to my workspace here, you'll notice that I have my different quotes available. So this is the first one that we open from desktop. If we go over here, this is the one that I was working on. I have the ability to tile them if I wanted to. So I have the ability to do that. We also have the ability to work as windows. So if you have a very large monitor, you can spread this out really far and you can have multiple quotes open at the same time. You can even copy and paste between documents as well, just like you do, again, in desktop. If you're working on some stuff and you're like, oh, customer's coming over, you have the ability to very easily close your different documents, and then very quickly you can go back and forth as needed as well. And we can go back like this. We can go ahead and maximize this one. Again, it's going to be very similar to the experience that you're used to on desktop. Speaking of the desktop, if we clear the desktop here, you do have the ability to personalize things a little bit by clicking on the change background. So if you've been using it a little bit, maybe you just want to change things up, it'll remember that last setting as well the next time that you log in. So you have the ability to change it up a little bit. All right. Okay, I think that's really all I planned on going over today. One last bit of nugget here is if you do need help, we have help available, access to our videos. She'll take you to our QuoteWerks Web videos here. If you have questions for the manual, you can do that. Our forum is available here, and also, obviously, if you want to contact support, here's how you contact our support team. Okay, so with that, if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask now. Otherwise, if you have questions after the webinar, like I said, feel free to give us a call back, 407-248-1481. You can also send an email to support@quoteworks.com if it's regarding the webinar itself, community@quoteworks.com, and we will be recording this as well. Just a little bit of a recap as far as pricing. QuoteWerks Web itself is $10 a month per user, so it does not need to match the number of QuoteWerks desktop licenses that you have, but it cannot exceed that number either. So if you have 2 QuoteWerks desktop licenses, and you wanted to have a third QuoteWerks Web user, you'd add another desktop license and the subscription for QuoteWerks Web. And all of the existing functionality that you have will move over. So like your Edelweiss, like you saw, Quote Valet, Vendor RFQ, that sort of thing as well. And our database hosting is, again, $10 a month. So if you are currently on QuoteWerks Desktop Corporate Edition and you have 2 users and you want to be on our hosting, it would be $40 a month. All right. So with that, it doesn't look like any more questions have come in. I was giving time there, as you could tell. But like I said, if you have any other questions, let us know. And we have another webinar coming up very shortly. And if we go over here, scroll down to the bottom, this is the best place to go to find out what's coming up. So you'll notice this is the webinar that you're at today. And in 2 weeks, we have a webinar about an integration with QuoteWerks Desktop and ChatGPT. So that should be fun. Let's see. I'm not sure what you mean by that, Mike. Is this in GA or? Oh, yes. Thank you, Mike. Yes, this is generally available. So it is ready to use. We have lots of customers that are currently using QuoteWerks Web. All the functionality that you saw is actually what is currently available. We have a new version of QuoteWerks Desktop coming out very shortly, or a new build, I should say, and that will have even more enhancements to QuoteWerks Web. And if you click on the Update Center, this will show you everything up until the current version of QuoteWerks Web that you're running as well. So you can see the entire history of everything that we've done in the last few years with QuoteWerks Web. All right, the dates columns, Shauna, I would recommend contacting support on that. I'm not sure as far as how the dates columns are working that you mean there, but if you talk to support, they'll be able to help you with that, or at least be able to maybe get some screenshots and find out exactly what you're looking for, and hopefully send that along to support to development. All right, with that, this is really it. Have a great day, everybody. And like I said, if you have questions, give us a call. QuoteWerks Web is a great option for you.